Here are the weaknesses that we see in the online work of most groups, and I think it's important to recognize that groups are really very aware of and frustrated by these weaknesses. First, groups are mostly working with too small an audience to make a difference or to reach the full potential of their work. Second, groups are often going through the motions of posting on Facebook or sending out tweets, maybe boosting Facebook posts with some ad dollars, but without usually a strategy for how this is going to build power or effectiveness or increase pressure on their target. Staff appreciate the importance of the online world, but without a strategy, they're often wasting precious time and resources. And third, groups are largely invisible where their people are. As of 2016, the average person's time on Facebook was nearing 1 hour a day. Meanwhile, the average group's post was seen by only 8% of their fan base on Facebook. Snapchat reaches 41%. That's 41% of all 18 to 34-year-olds daily are on Snapchat in the US. But we're not using it in our advocacy almost at all. And just in case you think that Snapchat is mostly a teen thing, half of all new users are over 25. And video is now the most popular medium by far. Yet how many of our groups are intentional about regularly using inexpensive, quick video captures as a way to engage? 4, groups are often using the same framing or messaging for their issues that they've been using for a while, without testing whether alternate frames might work better. They're often overwhelming readers with short attention spans with too much wonky or programmy text that isn't actually inspiring. They're too dependent on traditional media coverage for the most part. That means if we hold an action and it's not covered in the mainstream media, essentially it didn't happen. We're usually not measuring our online organizing. Groups tend to use easily available vanity metrics, such as the number of likes or retweets, but that doesn't tie into their mission. As a result, we have no idea what the real impact is, and we can't evaluate which channel is working for what. From one campaign to the next, we're not experimenting in a way that enables us to learn and hone our tactics. Groups have access to minimal staff training and support. Some of this is not always having a sufficient budget for it, and some of it is not knowing what difference it can make and where to turn. As a result, many staffers learn from a hodgepodge of often free webinars that make it to their inboxes. These are usually not advocacy-oriented and not strategic at all. So they're actually discourage the strategic use of tools and tactics. Even if staff are taking solid webinars, if it's not in the context of a good strategic plan for their online work, it can be difficult for a staff person to assess whether any of it makes sense to prioritize. And then there's the dynamic of taking a webinar or a few days of training and getting inspired only to come back to your work and your organization and not have a team that's been exposed to the same thing and not be sure how to implement what you've learned in a way that makes sense for your organization. Finally, we're now in an age where we have become extraordinarily digitally vulnerable to our opponents, yet few groups are practicing good digital hygiene or have put in place secure protocols for their work. Addressing security needs, therefore, must now be part of any advocacy group's online work. And Jonathan Stribling-Us, who is, as I mentioned, is an SMT staff partner and the director of a nonprofit called Constitutional Communications, is going to say a bit about this. Jonathan?
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being on the webinar here with us, and I think it is a really great to spend a moment to reflect on how these digital tools can really be most effective for smaller grassroots organizations, but also for large campaigns as well. So I'm a staff partner at SMT, and I'm an attorney as well that really has worked around these issues with both law firms as well as small movement organizations. And what we've seen is really that the kind of digital vulnerabilities to opposition have become a key aspect of any kind of campaigning in this current climate. Unfortunately, it doesn't take, if anyone who's been paying attention to the electoral campaign of 2016, I mean, Donna Brazile, who's the chair of the DNC, said, most notably that if there was one thing that she would have done differently about the campaign in 2016, it would have been to highlight cybersecurity within the organizing that the Democrats were doing. And I think that's something that all organizations can take heart to and really learn from the experience of the fact that the kind of opposition attacks are increasing in a huge way around in the digital security space. In terms of stuff that folks have clearly documented, you may have heard of James O'Keefe, who's the former kind of provocateur and infamous for bringing down Acorn by using kind of these highly edited, dishonest videos. And he unfortunately was given about $10,000 from the Trump administration or the Trump campaign back in 2015, which he then was caught soon afterwards in 2016, attempting to plan out a strategy to undermine the Open Society Foundation during the electoral campaign. When they first caught it, he accidentally left a message on their voicemail that outlined some of his strategy. So he was kind of buffoonish in his original attempt. But then soon afterwards, during the height of the election season, over the summer, we actually saw the Open Society Foundation hacked, and 2,000 strategic planning documents from the past 10 years were posted online and covered by Breitbart News in a clear political attack that really was used to undermine all of the work that kind of the foundation was able to support in terms of Breitbart covered it as though all of the activists in the Black Lives Matter were paid protesters, that they didn't have a legitimate grievance or weren't doing legitimate organizing. And this kind of opposition attack is something that we've seen more and more in terms of the way that the kind of fake news and spin can get played out along with these kind of hacks. And this is something where digital security does come in handy and is a really critical piece of all organizing in the current era. In particular, when a lot of these tools are not cost expensive and not resource intensive, something like two-factor, which would have stopped the Podesta hacks that happened to the DNC, it just takes an extra app on your phone that allows you to stop your password being taken for key organizational accounts. So that doesn't actually cost money. It takes a little more time for some organizing, but it is an important way that we can ensure that groups can trust the technology that they're using and not have the tech used against them by opposition. And so that's one thing that we do with SMT is really work with groups to ensure that we can kind of analyze where the resources can be most effectively spent to secure those key parts of their organizing that need to be most secured, and to understand who we need to secure those resources from. Clearly, not everything needs to be, and it's important that they're being public and out there with a lot of the organizing that they're doing and that they're being as vocal as possible, but there are key strategic pieces that we need to keep private, and we need a human rights approach to the technology that allows folks to have a right to privacy, which is something that is clearly defined. And that is something we try to work with folks around, is to ensure that they have that right in the organizing that they're doing. And just because they're being vocal around one political issue, like around pro-choice or around Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean that all of their private information is going to be, doxed and put online in a way that's going to really harm them individually, as well as possibly undercut their long-term strategy. And so there are a lot of key things that folks can do, and relatively simple things in terms of understanding the technology in a way that makes sure that they're not putting their personal information or their bank details or other things that are out there in ways that could be easily accessible to attackers or to opposition. And so we work with folks to really work that out. And so we've done 4 digital security sessions or we're coming up on the 4th one now in the last couple of weeks. And then we're going to be doing a series of digital security audits as well to really ensure that we can go deeper with organizations and really look at the systems they're using and ensure that they've done that in the most intelligent and strategic way possible, so that we don't see these kind of hacks being something that becomes an endemic feature of organizing, but instead it's something we can act with courage and make sure we can ensure everyone's human rights are maintained through the organizing they're doing. So I'm really happy that you all are here with us today, and we can continue to learn about kind of how digital security is part of a robust ecosystem that's going to make social movements most effective for the current era. So thank you all.
Great. Thanks very much, Jonathan. And I just want to add, Jonathan, to what you're saying, that the critical nature of foundations as an entity, as institutions that are holders of all kinds of strategic confidential documents regarding our movements, right? And so the critical nature of what the digital security practices that foundations themselves are using. So yeah, very, very important. I know for SMT, we're very careful, given that we're involved with many groups on strategy. We use Sandstorm. We're very careful that not to put strategy documents on Google Docs. We don't want them swept up by the government or anything else. So what does it look like when we're engaging in effective online advocacy? Well, first, strategy drives all of our use of channels, tools, and tactics, as well as our deployment of ad dollars and other resources. Second, audience expansion and activation becomes a major ongoing goal. We use key campaign moments online to amplify organizing and drive action taking, at a minimum to capture people's emails so we can engage them further. Third, we find out where our people are. What channels and apps are they using for what? And decide how to allocate our resources to build visibility where it matters most. Same thing with our targets. We do a power analysis of where their attention is on social media so we can be there. Fourth, we become really good at telling stories online. Facebook is the best medium for testing alternate framing or messaging on a campaign. For just a few dollars, we can run ads against each other to key segments of our target audience and see what messages resonate most. This is super powerful. It is increasingly being used in the political campaigns, and we are just, most advocacy groups are just missing the boat in terms of using the power of Facebook ads, even at a very affordable level. Fifth, when we aren't getting the media coverage we need, we feed the media using Twitter. One group we work with captured live footage as they took over a building under threat of arrest. They tweeted the footage to the media, and it was all over the evening news. Groups are vastly underusing Twitter to cultivate media coverage. And when traditional media fails us, we can orchestrate Twitter storms and make actions visible to tens and even hundreds of thousands using really very modest ad budgets. Six, we use mission-centered metrics instead of vanity metrics. An example would be, instead of tracking likes on Facebook, track petition signers who came through Facebook, or track numbers of tweets that were sent in to a target with our messaging. Groups that are focused on building their online effectiveness and tracking these metrics over time look to see if they can grow these numbers from one campaign to the next. 7, invest in training staff and get them some form of ongoing strategy support, either internally or from an external source. This is so important. You know, we often assume that young people know social media, and they may in fact be fluent in it, but they don't necessarily have advocacy experience. Using online tools to build power and effectiveness doesn't just happen because you've grown up using Facebook and Instagram. And finally, invest in digital security. This takes a very intentional commitment from top-level management to, for example, appoint someone to move this process forward within the organization and to give them the support they'll need. So this might sound like a lot, right? It kind of is, and especially because social media and technology are changing all the time. I mean, it is a lot, and that's why groups really do need the support. Here's what we've learned about what works. And by the way, this image here is an Indian woman telling the story of her rape using a dragon filter to preserve her anonymity on Snapchat. It was part of a group experience of speaking out using these powerful dragon filters. So here's what we've learned about what works. Training through in-person training or webinars is great. Webinars provide a really low-cost way to get everyone up to a certain level, and it's financially really accessible. Webinars and in-person trainings both have limitations, though. People often need an ongoing coaching relationship of some kind to really change behavior. An example of this is that we can train people on the more sophisticated uses of Facebook ads for organizing, but they have lots of questions once they're in the middle of a campaign about how to interpret the results, for example, and how to tweak their approach. A little coaching at that point can help them attain a much higher level of proficiency and confidence. The same goes for getting really good at using Twitter in organizing. We find that even after taking an intensive 3-part training series on Twitter, people will have questions throughout an entire year of coaching as they build expertise about really using it in different situations. We also have seen that people are inspired and motivated by peers working to improve online organizing. I mean, it can be hard, right? And in this work we do, and knowing that you have a community of people tackling the same things, and a place to come back with questions, a place to come back, to brag if you have an incredible success, can be really helpful. That's why we've moved to a group coaching approach, really, pretty much in all of our work. But we've also found that individual groups really benefit from having a roadmap at the start of the process. Sometimes there are some fundamental things that they need to put in place. Often it's an appropriate emailing and action tool. And they usually need more of an overall strategy for their online work. That's why we recommend that groups start with an online organizing assessment when they work with us or when they participate in coaching. John spoke about the digital security assessment. And finally, we find that most groups really benefit from having at least an hour or two of individual consult time a month to get support for the online work on their specific campaigns. And clearly, more is more helpful, particularly if it's a larger organizing or coalition effort.